Welcome back to the rant. This is part two. We're actually recording this before part one, but you'll be watching it, I guess, after part one, sorry. Glenn Pollard, good morning. And a very special guest this morning is Cameron O'Brien, who I think you're down in the Balnarring Peninsula, are you, Cam? Is that where you're from?
Yep, Balnarring Peninsula, yeah, which is sort of Ocean Grove, Barwon Heads Way, just a bit west of Geelong is where that is, if you can picture it. Yeah, thanks for having me.
So would you...
Good of you to come along, mate.
Yeah, so are you a bull man? Would you ever get across to Warrnambool for their big week, which is this week?
I did used to go, yeah, it's great fun. I did used to go with, life's a bit busy now, but I used to get down there every year if I could. It's basically a party for several days. That's happening this week, obviously.
Yes.
I used to love it down there. Really good fun week.
All right, so for those of us that haven't come across you before, you've got a deep racing background. You were mentioning me off air that your grandfather and uncles and dad and just totally invested in the punt. Yeah,
the O'Brien side. Our O'Briens came out in 1852 and been involved in racing pretty much ever since. But yeah, my grandfather was a big punter and SP bookie and publican, and my father did ratings and things. He did some work with Don Scott on his books, and my cousin's a trainer, Danny O'Brien, and his father bred and raced horses. His best one was a horse called Tennessee Jack, who ran the Melbourne Cup. It's just been racing all the way back through my family.
Wow, that is a big family of racing. Danny O'Brien, that's a big time trainer.
Yeah, he's been good.
And to describe for me as a little tacker, I presume you're watching what your dad was up to. How did it all start?
Well, it's probably pretty degenerate when you think of it, because he and I went to the 86 Melbourne Cup, I think it was the 86 one, which was at Talax Cup. And I had the Herald Sun Form Guide, and I'd already been interested in racing. I've been watching Kiwi a couple of years earlier and things like that. But I came up with some little point system for giving them points for, like, if they'd run at the track and run the distance, blah, blah, blah. And so Dad let me have $10 on my pick, which was at Talax. And so 10 became 60. And so I was rapt about that and pretty much hooked. And then, but, like, the Bone Crusher, our Waverley Star, was a couple of years later. I was, following that, heavily and very excited with that race. And so I was into it from a young age. And then when I was about 14 or 15, started reading Don Scott's books, and I've got a sort of bit of a maths brain. And so that analysis in that sort of way really struck a chord with me, and started doing weight ratings when I was about 15 as a result. And as I say, Dad had done that kind of thing. So it was a pretty natural thing to sort of start to do. And so, yeah, I've sort of been involved ever since and done ratings on and off until I sort of went off it for a bit as I traveled a little bit. And then in my early 20s went back into doing ratings and time ratings by now, because I've read stuff by Andy Bayer and, some of those time gurus in the States. And then was doing my own ratings, but I went up to work for Mark Reed. He was looking for analysts. So he was doing, he had back then at IAS, or Darwin All Sports as it was, a ratings database, and so they had several analysts who did the form, and they would actually really take horses on. So now, as you guys no doubt know, the corporates all sort of change at the same time. There's not much sort of fluctuation in the market, but Mark Reed did want to take horses on. So if we wanted to oppose something to be done the form, we'd put a price out beyond the market to actually bookmake properly, which is something I miss in the industry a bit, to be honest. It'd be great if there was a bit more personality in the bookmaking at the very least. But yeah, that's been my journey up until I left Mark Reed. That was a while ago now, but yeah, I've been doing ratings and things ever since.
Yeah, whenever we talk about people ahead of the curve or flying or new ideas, Mark Reed's name is like nearly the first name thrown. It's even more out there than, say, Dominic Byrne's name.
Yeah, he was certainly one of the forerunners.
My word, he was. And a clever man, very clever man. And I remember I walked into Randwick one day, and I was just parked my car, beaten up old Ford. I thought I was airborne at the time. I'm probably had a stack of money, but just thought I was completely airborne. And I heard this car come down the road, and it was like a brand new jet-looking Aston Martin or something like that. And there was Mark Reed. And I remember thinking, "Fuck, Glenn, you are just such a piece of shit compared to blokes who are really like." It was just an amazing feeling for me. And then I went on to work as a booking, and then one of the highlights of my bookmaking, which was only about 18 months, was Mark Reed next to me on the rails. And I remember thinking, wow, I should buy something better than the Ford, because this fucking cunt's got an Aston Martin. But he's just a dynamic man, isn't
he? Yeah, he did like people to know about it, that's for sure.
Yeah, but I don't mind if you could back it up.
Yeah.
And he's a player. Like, he thinks of ideas all the time, and just like,
Yeah.
his poor brain must be exhausted from living in that egg of his, you know.
So, what are some of the things that you got from that read experience that you've taken into your racing journey?
Yeah, sure. Well, he certainly helped. He and that method sort of helped me finish off working out how I wanted to do ratings. So my approach is very ratings based. As we're saying off air, I couldn't be a mounting analyst. I really wouldn't know what I was looking at. I know my horses look fitter than another one, like a Stay or Senior Scribs and things like that. That's about the extent of it. I know that when I used to see Hariba, that he was enormous, you know, and extremely muscled, for example. But beyond that, yeah, so that's not really my thing. So he helped me finish working out how I wanted to do ratings. How, you know, Don Scott used to do class-based ratings, and though Don Scott said that he didn't use times, I think that was a lie. But times in Australia are hard to use straight just on their own because of things like obviously wet tracks, but you can adjust for that. But slow paces is the biggest reason why times can be misleading. You know, like Northerly was always going around in races. It wasn't his fault. Like he often in races where it was sort of slowly running, times didn't look good, but he just kept beating them anyway. And so Mark would use, you know, their sectionals to help work out what the race did. And so for me, it became a mix of times, sectionals, and class kind of, and weight, obviously, based figures to work out what these horses are doing. And so Mark really helped in that. And Jared Toomey, who's up there, was really good as well. He was a great analyst, and he was sort of guy who taught a lot of us how that all worked. As I say, there was a lot of analysts working there back then. It's not really the case anymore. I mean, IAS got sold to Sportsbet, as everybody knows, and I think they maintain that database, but I don't think
yeah, they still have it. They still have it. But would you say that was like the university of or ratings analysts, certainly?
Yeah.
And would you find that given your sort of similar background that you'd be butting heads against some of those guys that you were working with on the punt in the years to follow?
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, sort of. Well, yeah, you sort of keep running into them in a way. Really, university part. Mark used to say, he said he'd wave his arms around. And he'd say, this is like a university degree. You should be paying me for this.
So yeah, in terms of the decisions to actually stand horses, which you know is obviously a critical part of serious bookmaking. Who were you sort of allowed much license with that, or did you have to sort of go through the top?
Well, it depends. So if you were the head New South Wales guy, then you were allowed the license. If you'd been there a while, then you were. If you're reasonably new, then not so much. But if you're new, so when I started, I was working as Jared's second guy in Victoria. So Jared was a Melbourne analyst, and so he would do the main meetings. So if I was, you know, I've done a minor meeting, and if you wanted to oppose one, then you'd tend to, in that scenario, bring it up with Jared, you know. And so you'd say, yeah, okay. And
you have to make the case.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But then I got shifted off that to do Adelaide. Adelaide only needed one analyst, so I did Adelaide on my own, which is preferred Victoria, of course. But then if you want to lay one there, you'd say it to either Mark or Nick, who worked for him as well, his son. And so, you know, yeah, you'd go through them generally. But then that was, you know, I was only there a couple of years. The guys that have been there for ages and ages. Like there was a guy who did Brisbane. He you know, he'd get a bit more license in that respect, I suppose. And obviously Jared would have, you know, license to do it if he wanted to do it.
So a bit of dash in a corporate environment.
Yeah, it was good. It was a really good time. It was a lot of work, but then, as I was saying to Mark before, it's you know, for me, in my early to mid 20s, and just wanted to do the form, and you know, we lived with three of the other guys from work as well, and so it was a good environment in that respect, that's for sure.
That sounds very exciting, doesn't it, Mark?
Oh, look, can you imagine? It's just living and breathing like betting and rating and analyzing, and it sounds like heaven, really. And you know, you get to go out with these guys as well. But of course, you know, it's not something you can sustain for a long time, but certainly it would have been very fertile and fecund in your ultimate racing or racing experience. So you wound up, I think, concentrating on WA. Is that still the case these days?
WA and Victoria. You know, I always liked WA. I ended up doing WA for Mark. So the WA guy left or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And so I was doing Adelaide, and so I inherited WA as well. And then so I got to like it, and I like it now and since, because you know, there's dry tracks a lot of the time. There's a few tracks, and you get to know the tracks quite well. So it's, and obviously there's very little horses, coming from the state, things like that. It's its own little region. WA obviously like to think they're their own little region. They've wanted to divorce themselves from the rest of the country politically for quite a while, and so they so it's a good little sort of closed circuit, you might say.
Yeah, going to Perth when I went over there, it does feel like it feels like you've gone overseas. Yeah,
they call us over east. That's what they refer to us as. I lived in Kalgoorlie for a year or so when I was 19, and everything's over east. Oh, they do this over east, and it sort of permeates the whole mentality of being a Western Australian.
Wow. So, I mean, the appeal, I can understand the appeal of a little backwater, self-contained sort of region in terms of doing the form. I mean, Hong Kong represents another region where it's self-contained, and you can really get a good handle on the pool of horses that you're working with. What view do you have on Eastern States racing that has informed your sort of racing experience?
Well, I've always, being a Victorian, I've always done Victorian form as well, and I've never really gotten a Sydney form. And my cousin Mark Roden, we work together on the same database, and he's always been a Sydney analyst.
Now I know his name. Who's Mark Roden? I know him, don't I?
Mark also worked for Mark Reed for ages and ages. So he's a second cousin of mine. His father and my father are cousins, and so they've been involved in racing as well. And so Mark was head Sydney analyst for years and years and years for Mark Roden for Mark Reed, and then Sportsbet got rid of a lot of their analysts a few years ago, and so Mark and I have been sort of working together since. And so he keeps doing the Sydney form. So I've never really gotten much into the Sydney form, but I wouldn't have time to do more anyway. So Victoria and WA is fine for me. And Melbourne racing is very different to say Perth racing. Perth racing really is sort of this sort of rinse and repeat kind of same horses over and over. Whereas Melbourne, and I presume Sydney, especially at the top level, is more about setting horses for races. Say Melbourne, we're not during the week at the provincials and all that, but leading into carnivals and things, horses are being set for a race. Obviously, Danny will be setting some of his runners for key races, this kind of thing, and then they might be going for a spell as they don't want to wear them out. Whereas Perth racing is more about keep the horse up for as long as they can and try to earn checks.
Fair enough. So what sort of challenge does that offer to the ratings guy? Because I would think that the ratings guy is more interested in the bread and butter, the situation you described in WA, and the tackling these sort of races where horses are set up is a bit of a challenge for a ratings person.
Yeah, well, you got to find it. I mean, think about Harlem winning the Australia Cup at long odds 2 years in a row. He was a Flemington 2000 metre horse, and he did nothing between those wins basically for a year, and then he comes up and he goes, "Oh, gee, he's done it again." He's because he's been set for that. They tried it again the third year, it didn't go any good. But he's been a really good example for me. I think of Harlem, and I think of that. I think you find a horse who's got the right track, got the right conditions for them that day, and very obviously set for it. So it's a matter of finding. It's rewarding when you find them. But then you can get it wrong as well, because if they haven't done anything, they might just be out of form and they might be gone. But yeah, it's that. But that's I guess that's more the major races. I mean, outside of the autumn carnival and outside of the spring carnival, it's like over summer, for example, it is more of that sort of trying to earn a check week by week, because people have got to get paid. The trainer needs to keep income coming in, and the staff need to get paid. So that's more for those major races, I suppose. Perth has less of the major races, obviously, than we do in Victoria, and Sydney does as well. So, I mean, we've got our set autumn and spring carnivals, and horses are really targeted for those, the good ones.
Yeah, so they're, but I mean, as far as the scheme of things go, there are relatively few races across the calendar.
Yeah.
So would you also say that with the demise of connections needing to bet to earn, that racing's become far more formulaic and easier from a sort of an auto perspective?
I would, because I think therefore there's less reason these days for horses to be pulled up. Well, the reason to pull horses up is just if you're targeting. So I would say that there's less of pulling them up for crookery reasons, because bookmakers can't really bookies can't lay a favourite for as much as they used to be able to, for example. So I'd say that there's more. It has become more formulaic, and that there is more of people just trying to earn a check out of their horse going around than what there used to be a while ago. As you say, when connections needed to get set, they would they'd hide the horse for start after start, and then launch, on a given day. So yeah, I agree with that completely, actually.
So that brings me to the question about the wagering landscape. So you've been on both sides. So what do you got to say about it at this point? And I believe that there are there are rumours that the MBL laws in Victoria will be brought forward to the time of opening prices.
Yeah, okay, well that's good. I haven't heard much about that, but it would be very welcome if it is, because it doesn't make sense that you can just from 9 a.m. is when it should happen. The wagering land, it's more formulaic now as well. As I was saying before, I wish there was more bookmakers willing to take a stand and take an opinion, have an opinion. Some of them do. I mean, like Top Sport do it a bit. But if a horse gets backed, they just have their bots, their trading programs now that will turn the horse's price off across all of the different bookmakers all at the same time. So there's not much difference between all the bookies. And I would say the biggest thing that's a disappointment for me in the last few years is more the demise of the tote pools. There's lack of liquidity in there. I mean, there's still, they'll go on a quaddie on Saturday at Caulfield or whatever. There's still a really good pool, but day to day, the exotics pools, there's not any meat on that bone anymore. It's just fodder for the likes of syndicates who are getting rebated, and they just push these divvies down. The trifectas used to be a really good bet type once upon a time, and they just don't pay anything anywhere near what they used to anymore. They've been completely flattened by rebated syndicates, basically. So that the demise of those pools, the tote pools, has been, I think, a disappointment. The corporate bookmakers have essentially taken all of the mug money from the mug punters mug's the wrong word, recreational punters, right? So all of the recreational punters who, you think about, if you go to a pub on a Friday afternoon at about 4 o'clock and you see all these tradies, they're betting, right? And the tradies used to pumping cash into the TAB. Now they're on their phone instead, and they're on their phone betting with the corporate. And so the corporate's taken all that money that used to go on these tote pools, and because they pay on this quasi product that is, a tote dividend. So they pay the tote dividend, which seems like an invasion of IP for me. I'm not sure how that legally that they can pay the dividend that the tote themselves are giving out. So that money goes to the corporate. The corporates have completely siphoned that money off. So the TAB fought back by trying to take their fixed odds market, of course, when in reality it might have been a better model if the TAB had stayed out of the fixed odds stuff and the corporates had stayed out of the tote stuff. Like leave them to have their own pieces of their own pies, and we would have had a better tote product. And we don't need the TAB with betting fixed odds, except that they do let you get set for more than the other guys do. But and so that the demise of the tote pools for me has been sort of and it's a problem nobody seems to want to address in that.
Well, there's no interest. I mean, I think the TAB is interested in migrating the rest of the tote over to their fixed odds, and as you say, the corporates have already worked out how to fish for the bit in the pool that they wanted in the first place.
Yeah, that's it. So there's that. There used to be fertile ground, but not so much anymore. So I guess you got to adapt. I mean, we've got Betfair now, as opposed to we never used to have Betfair, and so when I started with Mark, Betfair was just sort of in its infancy, I suppose. And so an exchange like that is really good for racing. And they're trying to do things like offer lower fees for early betting and things like that to try to increase liquidity early on. So there are things that pop up like that, I suppose, too.
So that's really a segue, Glenn, for Betfair's initiative this May, which is to offer lower com rates for earlier betting. So I'll just go through what that actually is. So the rebates, you can get an 80% rebate on your com if you put a bid in the exchange 3 hours before the race. 2 to 3 hours is a rebate of 70%. 1 to 2 hours is a rebate of 60%, and 15 minutes to an hour is 50%. Anything within 15 minutes, you're just paying your standard com. So GP, how does that fit with the way that you like to do things?
So is that for putting the bets in, but they've got to be taken?
No, they don't have to be taken. They just have to be.
Well, that doesn't make sense. So you could put in like a 2,000 or something at $1.10.
What? And but if it's not matched, you won't get the rebate on the com.
Well, that's what.
Yeah, but it needs to be put in, right?
Yes, it's got to be.
There's no com if you haven't had a bet.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, Sorry.
So yeah, so for example, Glenn, would you be looking at play, accessing
Early play?
Yeah.
It's to me, it sounds like the vaccine. No, but what I mean is, I'll get it once you've all got it.
But 15, okay, so 15 minutes out from the race.
I'll definitely play if there's something to play with. But will I be on the front foot putting the bet in there first to lay at 460, thinking put 1,000 against it at 460 and it gets taken and starts 320? Well, that doesn't sound any good.
Right. So you want to respond to the market. But as I say, 15 minutes out from the race, you can still get a 50% rebate on the com. Cam, are you a big player on Betfair or you use it to shore up your positions, or how do you?
I use Betfair for my own stuff sometimes, but yeah, I try to get some fixed prices if I can, because earlier on, and because I'll often move, and so it depends where it is too. But then I might use Betfair towards the end, close to the race. But that would be it'd be something I'll look at. I saw that it's only a couple of days ago they released it, I think, wasn't it? But,
yeah, well, it's from 1 May.
I've had a little think about it. I haven't sort of thought about the logistics.
I haven't really got my head around it myself either. But I like to see it in front of me and then work out my position then. Anything Betfair
it'd be good
does,
if it works. It'd be great. Any discounts, obviously, great.
Anything Betfair does to increase liquidity would be great.
Yeah, completely.
Is there any rebates for in play, Mark?
No, but look, I suppose I do see the occasional tweet from one of the racing players where he says, I've put up 1,000 at 460 on this horse, just letting you know that it's there. I mean, it is an opportunity for players to actually take a bit of a stand early, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Very interesting.
If you did think that a horse was going to shorten, so the other way, the reverse of that scenario, if you did think a horse was going to shorten and you put up and you're out there fishing early for a bet and somebody does match you, then it could be a double win. If it does shorten, you've gotten matched early and got the discount. Yeah.
Look, I think it's an interesting initiative, and I should also point out that the great man Roy Key tweeted last year, September the 3rd, 2020. He said, if early liquidity is something you're really serious about, you could possibly offer reduced com rates for early bets. So maybe
what a visionary.
All right. So we're about to review a replay of a race. Cam, how much video watching do you do?
Yeah, if this is the last at Eagle Farm, I did see this race. Yeah, I do a bit. Yeah, I'm more in the likely race horses. The more raced they are, the more you sort of get to know.
Okay. And so how many tapes a week would you watch, for example, or do you watch on demand?
Yeah, pretty much on demand. Yeah. If I'm rating a meeting post-race, so if I haven't seen the meeting, if I didn't see the races, then I'll have to flick through the races just to see if there's anything I need to pick up on. But otherwise on demand, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, so a good ranter, Adam, he says, please review the ride of Emerald in the last at Eagle Farm last Saturday. Yes, slow away, but what on earth was he doing going up the inside and then switching to the outside? This doesn't look good. A moral beaten. And he goes on to say, the key point is that there is a 3-wide running line that he ignores, and then it's that same horse he follows in the end. So I don't know what you were up to come the last at Eagle Farm on Saturday, Glenn, but this might be the first time you're watching it, but let's see what we can deduce out of this race. So share the screen. Yes. Yes.
The carnival rolls onto the Gold Coast next week for Gold Coast Cup Day. Garibaldi,
the outside barrier
of the day here.
Outside barrier is
short
in as well. So
Garibaldi, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I did watch this.
This race over 1,200, and
so I've just muted that because we don't need to hear Josh, because we're going to see what goes on here.
So who wins the race? Bowman on Fender.
Yep, that's it. So Bowman finds one out, one back, as he loves to do. Garibaldi's just missed the start slightly and gone back to the tail. So this is a favourite, obviously. Cam, if you were on this horse,
equal favourite.
Right. If you were on this horse, how would you want him to be riding it from this position?
Well, assuming that the track was playing that it's okay to come down the middle, yeah, to be tracking. So the horse 3 wide, he could have been on the back of there. So that's a bad spot to be in now. That's a shocking spot to be in.
Yeah.
I mean, Pike does this a bit. He seems to get away with it, where he'll go up, but go up and try to get a run through the field, and when it comes off, you look like a genius. But right now you can see he's held up, so it hasn't really come off. If he'd gotten through, he could have looked like a genius, but it's such a risky proposition, given that was the rail off?
Yeah, a bit.
Because it had poured down during the day.
Well, just a very murky day at Regal Farm all round.
Yeah, well, Saturday though, between.
What is everybody talking about?
So, well, the fact that
he's done nothing wrong, has he?
Well, he got held up.
Okay, but we're in racing the horses. You get held up. It's not like not everyone's on the lure. Like, so okay. Oh, what's his option? To go round the grey there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what they're saying. But people like Michael Rod, they're looking for a soft run. It just didn't work out at the time. I don't think there's anything untoward.
No, nothing. Well, that's what I'm saying. See, Pike does it, and as I say, when you get that run through, you look like a genius. You know? Yeah. And so it can work out. He took the chance. But yeah, it just didn't pay off.
Guys, we are in a game which is ambling. Okay, so you're not happy about being there, but when he extricates, there's plenty of time to get there. I know this horse did trade $1.10 in the straight.
Wow.
What, at this point, did it?
Yeah, $1.10 it traded.
They do seem to trade very short when they are sort of making their run and they're a particular...
Okay, so it's made, but it got beat. Isn't that just? I don't see anything wrong with that, right?
I just did. He took a risk and it didn't pay off.
Yeah, he made one poor decision that didn't work out, but he could have easily looked like a genius. And I got no problems with that. I don't think. Usually I stick up and want to get stuck into the jocks, but not this time. And I
don't think there's anything untoward. I just think he tried to sort of see if he could pinch the run, given he missed the start.
Yeah, I think I'd be dirty if I backed it because
it's not funny.
I've never seen anything like Pike. He's only happy if he's in reverse for the first 600, and then he gets him going. And Betfair just drives me mad with him in the run because he jumps at $2. So you think, okay, well, I don't want to lay $2 Pike because they just seem to win all the time. And then in the run, he takes him out to 320. You think, oh, I should have laid this time. And then boom, he gets the. Yep. And yet when I've seen him go to the front, it looks like he's unhappy land.
Yeah, no, he does ride well in front runners as well, but he's just made it his thing where he'll even if he's back on the rail, he'll just wait and find a gap somehow. I mean, he's riding the Oakley plate. Yeah, he's riding the Oakley plate on the dead heater was out of this world. And there's a photo you probably saw.
Yes, I've seen it. Low down. He's actually shoving the horse forward. Incredible. It is an incredible photo. So is life easier without Pike there at the moment? That in WA I'm talking about?
Yes and no. I mean, like he does occasionally get up on some. It's when he's on the Peters horses that he tends to go around really short. You know, the Bob Peters horses, Durant and those guys. But
pink and white.
Yeah, pink and white. That's right, Cerise and white. And then he'll go around on something else. He wins on double figure things sometimes, and he'll go around on something else and they don't like it, and up he gets. And so I never back him on. I'm rarely on him on those shorties because they often go around shorter than they should be. And if you look at Pike's stats overall, if you back him overall, you lose. But if you find the right ones, one that's not that fancy, he can still find a good price for him. But I loved him seeing in Melbourne in the spring. He rode brilliantly in the spring. I thought he silenced a lot of sort of people want to knock him a bit and sort of say, oh yeah, you're a flat track bully over there in Perth, big fish in a little pond. But he rode brilliantly in Melbourne in the spring. And I think he showed that if he was over here all the time, I think he'd be top, one of the top line riders for sure.
Wow. All right. Well, Al from Newcastle, he writes, hi Mark, Glenn, and Gordo, but Gordo's not here today, so Cam's thankfully come in to help us out and to tell us a bit about himself. He says, trust all is well. Looking through the racebook from Canterbury, noticed that a former Newcastle horse called Prince Granada still holds the 1900 metre trek record. Well, that is amazing, Glenn, isn't it? 9th of January, 1983. Would have to be one of
I remember it winning.
Would have to be one of the oldest course records in Sydney Metro racing.
It's unbelievable that it's still got that record.
Prince Granada was part owned by long-time NJC member and good mate Alan Arnott, better known as Biscuits. He started his racing career by winning the 1979 Breeders' Plate as a 2-year-old in Randwick. Still remember the day. The Newcastle boys got plenty from the bookies when trained at Broadmeadow by Noel Holmes. who I don't remember. Later on, he'd be transferred to Theo Green, and
I don't remember that name.
a very young Morris Logue rode him when he established the track record at Canterbury. Yes, great memories from a horse that won a Breeders' Plate,
that.
still holding a 1900 metre course record. Well, he actually was trained by Pat Quinn when he won the Canterbury race at 1900 metres, where, of course, he led all the way and beat Big Bickies, who you would remember very well, Glenn. He was an 8-year-old at the time.
That's funny. He beat Big Bickies when the bloke was owned by a horse called Biscuits.
It is pretty funny.
That's
but
a great Quinella.
There's another. So he won the Breeders' Plate. He won another 2 Sydney races, and then he got beaten in the Gosford Slipper, which was then run in December.
Yeah.
But he was like one of the early favourites for the Golden Slipper, which
Yeah.
he ended up running in. Dark Eclipse won the I think it was Dark Eclipse won the 1980 Slipper. But anyway, so then he battled around, ended up being a horse that had like 51 starts for 8 wins, ended up with John Size having 2-0 starts in Brisbane in 1984.
We saw the Breeders' Plate winner on Saturday. He looks like he's going to battle around for another 4 or 5. What's he called again?
Global Quest.
Global Quest. There. So this is Prince Granada's Global Quest. If only Global Quest came out and got the 1900 metre Canterbury record in the next year or two.
Well, the reason I want to mention it is because 12 months before he set his Canterbury course record, he was still with Theo Green, who was trying to get him to win a race, and there was a demonstration at Rose Hill exactly 12 months earlier, when Prince Granada bounced back with a win that set punters hooting at Rose Hill yesterday. Green went to the trouble of approaching the stewards before the 1900 metre race to seek permission to try new tactics with Prince Granada. The stewards agreed to the trainer's suggestion that Prince Granada be ridden closer to the lead than in previous races. The plan worked, thanks in large measures to jockeys Ron Quinton's determination to make the 4-year-old stallion do his best. He didn't end up a stallion, of course. I just want to read something else from.
So we can thank Theo Green for all these reporting to stewards with what has changed 40 years later.
Yeah, so they actually announced it on course that there was an intention to lead on Prince Granada, and that is 1982. Cam, I just want to use that to lead into the announcement of the changes of tactics. Have you got any sort of opinion on that?
That we do it now, do you mean?
That we do it in abundance. It seems to drive punters mad because a lot of these intentions don't seem to be played out.
Well, that was what I was going to say. I mean, you hear this horse is going to lead and then it still settles, near last anyway. It's it's confusing. It's confusing. So I mean, do they? Let's say they got a horse who usually settles back, and they say they're going to lead. I mean, what if the horse just can't? What if it doesn't have the pace to lead? It's just too slow. So some of these slow one paces.
They do it as a tool to help punters. I know they do it with the right idea, but I think as punters, we just don't want to hear it. Rather just work it out.
Yeah,
it's like the speed maps in New South Wales have now become organised boaties, but they're trying to help us.
Yeah,
but all the riders go, oh, that's where I've got to be, and that's where I'll be, and it certainly doesn't help. You look at New South Wales racing, the tempo in all of it is just terrifying. All because this document's provided that people follow.
Well, it's pretty important, I suppose. I mean, Canterbury is traditionally, in recent times, I suppose not so much traditionally, been just such a hot rail, hasn't it, up there?
Just super hot.
Yeah. So how does that factor in? So, Mark, if you're looking at the horses in the yard at Canterbury, I mean, isn't it? If the horse is the best in the yard, but it's going to be 3 wide, it's
well, I've got a responsibility to provide Manning Yard Mail, and I take it really seriously. But I think my overall responsibility is to try and find people who are getting my stuff a winner. So, for example, let's say I have a horse in barrier 1 that's parading really close to top, but I have a horse in barrier 12 which looks like heaps better. I'll put the first one on top.
Yeah.
And I'll try to mention it like suited or this one, and then I'll even make them a comment. Draw's not ideal, and so I get away from the Manning Yard Mail because I get so. See, with Manning Yard Mail, I'm looking for a half length. I'm looking for a length. I'm sometimes looking for 2 lengths, and then when you have a rail that has a -5 or 7 lengths, my job. I actually feel like sometimes I feel like just text it, tools down, boys. Leave me out.
Yeah, when it's that pronounced,
it's torture.
And that's where it becomes the only important thing, and that's one thing that does annoy me. I try to stay away from those kind of tracks. I'm glad Canterbury's, but or Perth. I try to stay away from those contracts because then it's just about the rail. So given that my method is ratings based, and given my strength lies in having accurate ratings, any situation where the ratings are getting tossed out the door or out the window,
You stay out.
Stay out, leave it.
Well,
so I hate pot rails.
People like Gordo, he bets up.
Yeah, yeah.
He just goes, oh, what a beauty.
Well, yeah.
Pen. I'm backing this, and this, and I'm tripling my bet. So, now, I know Rob Waterhouse says to me, I wish this is terribly biased. I wish it was worse.
Yeah. No, I get that. And, maybe I should.
Get it too.
Maybe in those circumstances, I should look at circumstances, but I just find it hard to then throw the ratings out the window. But
well, you're quite invested in the first place, and I think
that's
what Glenn's pointing at, that you were dealing with another style of punter who is quite nimble and is actually not that invested in the form in the first place.
Yeah, that's fair enough. So the hot rail is the worst bias in racing for me.
I hate it.
The rail off is fine because everybody can get off the rail.
I love it.
But not everybody can get on the rail.
Gord strengths up the inside. He kills up the inside. I know it's up the inside. I know where everything's going to be. I leave the track. I've done my balls. I just talk to myself the whole way home. But if it's down the outside, I've absolutely filled up. And someone like Gord's gone, oh, no, it was too much for me. So it's all differing strengths and thought patterns. But my job as a mounting yard mail expert, whatever the word you want to bloody use, is like, it's a tough gig when it's rail on fire. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, for sure.
But it does speak to the artistry of doing the form and betting on playing races. I mean, it's, we've got a technician in one corner and a horse viewer in another corner, but it's not enough, is it? It's actually not enough.
Not in those circumstances. No. It's and like if you get a real bog track, it's the same kind of thing. So a heavy 10 plus kind of track. Now the ratings mean much less than who the hell is going to handle it, So it's a similar kind of issue there, but just a different scenario. In that, if you've got the best horse in the race, but they don't like a wet track, they're not going to go anywhere near the top.
All right, let's move on to something else, which is our Hong Kong man said that suggested, and you probably came across this story last week, Cam, about the jockey name change, which was a big punters pushed it hard.
And not much written about it, was there? I had it on the front page of the paper, that story.
Yeah, I suppose so.
I mean, I know we've got COVID and pandemics and 4 million a day dying in India, but geez, a jockey changing his name's a bigger story.
Well, our Hong Kong man says Terry Treichel obviously attracted by those "see you in the NT" ads. Highlight line in this week's show from Gord, paraphrasing, was that maybe the corporates would take legal action against Terry Treichel if they've lost a large amount of money on his bets. Gord clearly doesn't know any jockeys. Boom, boom. The Treichel story reminds me of a couple of stories, one handed down, one I was there for. The first was an old story from the days when riders were posted 30 minutes before a race. Some team of smarties set one up for a first up plunge on a Sydney track, booked one of the better riders at the time, but when the riders were posted, the jockey for the horse was someone unknown. So bookies relaxed until an avalanche of money came for the horse. When riders came out to the paddock, here was jockey A, and people started to scream blue murder, probably bookies. He produced the paperwork to prove he'd changed his name by deed poll, so he rode the horse successfully under the bodgy name, then changed his name back the following week.
Wow.
The other story was that I was there in the late 70s at Canterbury. Well, it was actually the end of 1980, but close enough, where he says a horse called Tahiti Grey from the Jack Denham stable turned up first up with a rider nobody knew. Was well backed, I think returned 12-1, but I recall getting 25s in the outer, ridden by a jockey nobody knew, rode like G. Moore and an easy winner. The rider, Stephen Mitchell, told his story after the race, had been an apprentice in the late 60s and had a fall. When he returned from injury, couldn't get a ride, so he quit and started a carpet-laying business for the next decade, which apparently went well. Had made a comeback for the ride, and not sure I ever remember him fronting up again. Someone else might recall more. Well, I've pulled out the piece there, and Bert Lilly wrote, it was a memorable day for Stephen Mitchell, who won the first prospect welter on Tahiti Grey. Mitchell, unknown to most race goers, was having his first ride in a remarkable comeback. He quit racing when he finished his apprenticeship to Jack Denham in 1970 to run a carpet laying business. I had a bad fall on the track when I was 21 and was sidelined for 6 months. When I resumed, nobody wanted to give me a race ride, so I went into the carpet business. Mitchell, 30, explained. Well, I had a look and I couldn't find that he got another ride. It was one of those Jack Denham bodgies that that worked, and he ended up riding bloody barrier trials for Mayfield Smith in the mid-80s. So thanks for
that first one. That seems that first story, changing your name. What year was that one? What top? Did he say what time that was?
No, I'd suggest it was mid-century or even earlier.
Because I know that these days you're only allowed to change your name 3 times in Australia by law. So
okay.
And these days not more than once in 12 months. So whether that was different back in the day, it's to stop obviously fraud and things like that. But so he's used up two of his name changes there for one winner. That's dedication.
Well, you could get on. You could get on then, indeed.
Yeah, you could. That's right. Yes.
Phil writes.
Oh wow, incredible.
I wonder if it is a great story. Phil writes, I wonder if it's mere coincidence that Misters Berry, Bowman, McDonald and McAvoy have all managed to get the suspension so as to miss the standalone Saturday meeting.
I think Nash joined them on the weekend. They're all like Mauritius.
And Clippo. J-Mac is off to New Zealand. The other 3 will probably chortle away in front of the telly watching a substandard meeting on a terrible track surface. But then why would they bother to watch? It really makes you wonder about the boffins in this industry. They'll put a Saturday meeting on a dog track like Hawkesbury and yet refuse to do the same to a well-grassed superior track like Warwick Farm. I suppose if you stick your head in the sand after you make a stupid decision, you don't have to listen to any rational discussion about that decision. Cam, when they run those Saturday meetings out wide in Victoria, what take have you got on that? I see there's a proliferation of them now. Pakenham have got, but obviously Bendigo, Ballarat, and other places.
Bendigo's okay. So for me, it's about the track itself. Bendigo's all right. It's a good track to bet. Mornington has one, but I'm not a big fan of Mornington. I prefer them in metro tracks. Caulfield and Flemington are the best 2 tracks we've got in Victoria, and so I'd prefer them just to race there. The Valley's, the Valley's quaint and all that, but I'd much prefer them to just go around at Caulfield and go around at Flemington, personally.
Which I think
you don't race at Sandown anymore. It's over at Sandown, is it?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Sandown races during the week,
and
they have their Cup Day, a zipping classic day at the end of the carnival.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they did race there on the weekend, but they do have the occasional one. But Caulfield and Flemington have the majority of the Saturdays. And Moonee Valley gets a lot of the night meetings, of course, and then they have Cox Plate Day.
Yeah. When I lived in Melbourne, they call it Death Valley. I know why.
Yeah, it can be tricky, especially if it starts to rain. It's so much more about the pattern than anywhere else.
Tracks,
the Valley.
When you can peel and present
right.
4 wide at the 400 there and just roll them in.
Yeah, so you think of the Mackay Diva Cox Plate that you won, for example.
Yeah. I've really noticed it can within play betting at Moonee Valley. They take very short odds with 400 to go, and they're right.
Yes, because they know exactly where the right spot to be is. So that's what we're talking about before. Then it's about that. It's about the pattern more than anything else. I want to bet at tracks where the pattern is irrelevant, because then it comes down to the ratings and then the map and things like things that I make.
And you're prepared to say, well, I'll back myself to be right.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. So the pattern, when it's about the pattern, then other people are more qualified, I suppose.
Well, they're geared up with robots and everything to just like they'd have a set of prices starting, say, 5 to 2 the field, right down to 200s, and it's 100% market. And then they realize that for whatever reason, it's at -1 and -2, negative up to 12, whatever, depending on with the barriers. They put that variable in, the prices just go, pa-ching, just changes everything. Yeah, well, that's what we're all up against.
The likes of Yelko Syndicate, they have what's called a live bias. So they'll have a guy who updates race by race what the live bias is, and they'll adjust their figures based on that. And I know that in the in the Melbourne Cup Day where Prince of Penzance won, for example, there was a strong bias that day. You couldn't get out beyond about 3 horses wide. You couldn't get out there and win at Flemington that day. And so coming around the home turn, most of that field couldn't win the race. There's only about 6 or 8 could win the race, and Prince of Penzance was one of them. And so that day, I think they made a bit of money out of that, because they realised, well, this bias only suits a handful of horses here. So it's organisations like that who have that screwed down. It's hard for an individual to really get that kind of level of sophistication.
Imagine going to year 1 with fucking Jelko and a bag of fucking marbles. He fucking turned up. He'd be 6 years old. He'd have 15 fucking tombolas. He'd have every kid's fucking marble, and then he'd fucking want to get more. He's a freak.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. He doesn't seem to get satisfied. Wants
Nope.
to world domination. Apparently, they refer to it as.
But they are still making decisions on very, very small samples. So aren't we actually a hope of them making mistakes?
Oh, I'm sure they make some, yeah, of course. But I guess if you're doing the live bias for Jelko and you're doing it at the Valley, you've probably done a lot of them at the Valley, and you're probably already sort of aware of what's, you've got that historical element. Yeah, yeah. Obviously, the guy at Canterbury's got a pretty easy job.
Yeah. I forgot to add to the name changes. On name changes, David Van Dyke was originally David Hayes, got time and came back again as Van Dyke. Well, I do remember that.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, we do remember that.
Adam writes a few items of discussion. K. O'Hara on Waller runners is a pen job. I'm disgusted with myself for falling into Yangtze Rapids on the weekend, as am I. But you were on the money there, Glenn. Absolutely knew what you're doing. Not because O'Hara doesn't have ability, but it's just a no-go with that stable. This doesn't make any sense to me either, as she's the partner of Charlie Duckworth. You'd think he would throw her the odd bone other than the one he throws her in the bedroom. And two, how do we rate the performance of Jay Cummings at Godolphin thus far? For me, he's won some big races, but at times I feel he's mismanaged some of the potential superstars and hasn't really made too many great stallions. There's been some strange management of stable superstars too. Think example of trekking going all over the country. Wasn't it a good lay on Saturday? Avilius being clearly a 1,600 to 2,000 metre horse, but being extended out to 2 miles for several Melbourne Cup attempts seems to have ruined it. And let's not forget sticking G-Boss on Bivouac as the main rider. Thoughts?
Well, I would give James Cummings a better rating than I think as far as Avilius going out to Melbourne Cups, that's probably from the daughter kidnapper over in fucking desert land saying, listen, we want to win the Melbourne Cup. I think he'd be under a lot of pressure for things like that. And I would say he's done a pretty good job. He's been under heaps of pressure with media requirements, and I think he's held the team together. Well, I'd give him about a 7.5 out of 10. I think he's done a lot better than you think.
He's married.
He's a young man.
Isn't he married to the daughter of a brewer or something? So he's done well there.
He's actually she's daughter to, they say, could be the richest man in the world. That bloke in
Eduardo Cuenco.
Eduardo Cuenco. He could be because he has because he's area of his base. They don't not like the. Let's put it this way, he's got a lot.
Yeah. Well, so when he went out on a date and asked her, "Does your dad own a brewery?" He got the positive response. He's done 10 out of 10 there.
Done very well in life. Good on him. And I'll tell you one thing about James Cummings. He's one of the few trainers, John O'Shea's another one, Chris Lee's definitely, go out of their way to come and say hello to me, and I am fucking nobody. And they're just very affable, decent people. Like, hasn't got anything shoved up his ass, that James Cummings, I promise you.
Just back on the Kathy scenario, she's over the last 2 years, her profit on turnover is pretty much even Stevens, so minus 0.31% across 1,100 odd rides. But for Waller, she's 7 from 108. Her pot there is minus 33%.
Wow. So she's the go-to when Chris doesn't want to win.
Well, he's got.
Well, the horse is not ready. They might have a,
she's about fourth in line, isn't she, for Waller? Is it about right?
She would just ride the horses that have 52 Ks, I'd say.
Yeah, right.
She's a lightweight rider.
Yep.
Yep.
Willow writes, "G'day, Mark, Glenn, and Gordo. If they are really your names, I'm wondering how you all."
Well, I read that. Why would he say that? Why wouldn't it be our name? Oh, that's a joke. Now I've got it.
Well, you might have changed it to get
by
on.
deed poll. Now I didn't get it at first. I thought this sounds anarchy bloke thinking we've got assumos, but no, I missed the point. So I apologise.
Sorry, just going back to the James Cummings. Did they have any luck getting that horse banned from the Kentucky Derby? I haven't followed the story. Glenn, you've seen it?
No.
So there was a movement in the US. The human rights movement went to the court to try and get the Godolphin runner banned from the Kentucky Derby on account of the Sheik's crimes back home.
Oh, wow. No, I haven't heard anything about that. No.
Anyway, we'll
First I've heard of that too.
press on that with that next week. Get back to Willow. He says, I'm wondering how you all did your pre-race form in the days before speed maps and race replays. Was it purely done on times and what you'd seen at the races previously? Well, I remember watching lots of replays from the mid 80s. I'd stay back after the last.
Yeah, watch them at the track, put notes in your race book. And then also the sportsmen used to have those detailed comments about where they were in settling and where they were on, but a lot more of it was memory. But, you know, it was a different, certainly nowhere near the expertise of today. Is it Willow his name?
Yeah.
But honestly, as far as winning money back in those days, it's just a matter of turning up the track. If you could count 10 fingers on your hand, you could win money. It was just very easy to win. Like, not like today, sharp, wasn't like that at all.
Well,
you know, and I used to follow things like, you know, big failures on wet tracks. Oh, it's back to a dry track. Oh, look, it was 7-2 on the bog, and now it's 50s on the dry. Oh, all right, I'll have 100 each way. Yeah, things like that. Each way was about 256% in the place, so it was just gold. Every single better was each way.
Quarter odds each way.
Yeah, just all you did was turn over money and collect. And then when you lost on the day, you just think what idiot you were, but you knew you'd win on the week. It was just a different time. Whereas now they just like do 10 times the amount of work and then put your bets on and then hide under the couch and not watch the race because you're so terrified about they're not in the right racing position and the inside of Canterbury is fucking on fire and pray to God you become religious. That's how you win now.
I know that I've got this well before my time, but I know that Don Scott used to, in the days before replays, he used to get a guy take photographs, you know, and purchase the photographs from him.
Yeah, that bloke, he's still in business today. Who does?
Yeah, well, he inherited
a couple
the
of
business.
clients.
Yeah, Michael Smith we're talking about. I used to buy those photos, especially for the provincials, taken at the 800
love those photos.
And the 400 and the finish.
And the 400 and the
those
finish.
strip photos were very, very useful, obviously.
And they were about as big as your computer screen, the photos. They were black, but they were really awesome information. People loved them. In the 80s and 90s, I used to bet at the dogs, didn't know anything about greyhounds. And I'd put 20,000 on the tickets and people would say, oh, Glenn, you're pretty good. What are you doing out here? And I used to say, I'm out here practicing. That's how much ego you could have. Yeah, fine. Give us 20 to 1,800. Yeah, it's a bet. Oh, Glenn, you know any bet? No, just fucking they're betting 94%. I might as well have a bet. It was just different times.
Lads, just as far as going, I'm going to have to go pretty soon.
Yes. All right, no worries. Look, Cam, it's been so interesting having you on. I've really enjoyed listening to your stories about where you started, and I really appreciate you coming. I'm sure the viewers will really enjoy it.
Oh, no, thanks, guys. It's been great.
Okay, and where can anyone find you if they want to look for you, Cam?
Yeah, well, I've got a service for Winning Edge Investments on WA racing and also for Champion Bets. So I've got subscribers. I do previews and things on there too. It's not just giving out tips and that. I often put up previous big races and things like that. Put up some video content as well. So those two websites, they're both good bunches of people. And you can find me there.
All right. Well, thanks for your input today because it was great having you on, and we might see you again.
Yeah, happy to. Good to chat.
Good luck, Cam. Good luck.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
All right, Glenn. Well, let's just tidy up this show, and then we can actually get on to part one. There is this is from PVL Sycophant. And his email is jokeaboutjmac@gmail.com. He says there's constant talk from Twitter, your show, other shows about the introduction of the POC tax, how short-sighted it may be and how wrong PVL is, etc., etc. I was originally one of them, mostly out of self-interest, but did think it was taking a bigger piece of a significantly smaller pie. However, maybe he is right after all. Maybe punters aren't as price sensitive as they make out to be. And really, there are more gourds out there who will just take any price. It'll just win. The ongoing figures they release in both New South Wales and Victoria in regards to turnover are forever increasing, unless there are recent ones I've not seen. People will say that COVID plays a role in that, which I totally agree, but the figures were increasing prior to that. It was introduced in 2019. On the flip side, if turnover does start to regress, how long will it take them, if at all, to accept the current model as the reason behind it, given the large success since its introduction? I'm only a silver member, so I only watch previous shows, but haven't noticed much of a change in attitude to tipping or betting. Mark does point out that early prices are farcical and the even shot should really be 2 to 1 in a liquid 100% market. Oh, and Glenn's saying he'll wait till he gets $7 to back a genuine $3 chance. So my question to you is, how has it changed your own betting? Do you just bet later as percentages are too high in early markets? Have you noticed a drop in turnover or pot? Have you expanded to outside New South Wales to look for more opportunities? Be interested to hear your thoughts. Cheers. So it's
Well, it's affected the competitiveness of the market. But I think he's quite right that PVL said, oh, punters won't care. I think in general, punters 30 years and under, the younger brigade, they don't care. I think PVL got that right.
So you would say that the operators that are tasked with actually finding the punters have gone out there to find the punters that don't care.
I think that's for sure. And the ones that do care, they want a bar.
But surely that is still unsustainable in the long run. If you're taking that much out of them, if the takeout is that high, you know, you're relying on them to lose quite a lot of money to sustain the model.
I think he was right. I think they don't give a fuck.
Anyway, how it has changed my betting.
Like if someone said to me something's 460, I could take 420. Like to me, they look like, you know, Australia to England. They're miles apart. But a lot of punters think, oh, it doesn't matter. I think it'll win. I love back at JMAC. I like back in Greys. That the younger punter's just so uneducated. It just
but you would think so. It's relying on the fact that they've just got money to chuck around.
Exactly.
Because the old model was, oh, we need to get people interested in playing this game.
Yeah,
and stay playing. Whereas now it's just, chuck it on. It's
if for every 10 new blokes we get, only 6 will do it a year from now. We've got a growing population in this country. I just think.
But so they're relying on a boom market in the rest of the economy.
Yes. While everyone's going good, like tradies are earning fortunes. Real estate, everyone's getting a fortune. Cab drivers earn 8,000 a week. I told them that.
Yeah. Okay. So a recession will just completely kill it off.
Possibly.
All right. Thanks for that, PVL sycophant. And finally, I think that's pretty much it.
That was really good having Cam on. He was a really great guest, Mark. Found.
Yeah, I must say he's.
I enjoyed listening to him, which is I never enjoy anybody. So that was.
All right, so I'll be doing a preview show with young Daniel Ivers tomorrow for where are we? Canterbury. I've stuck him onto Canterbury, which I'm sure he'll love, and Matt will be along to be a threesome on that preview show. So that'll be Tuesday. Glenn and I will be back with a top up on Wednesday. And then we'll be doing the form later in the week for Gosford, featuring the Coast. So look out for that. Meanwhile, Glenn and I are going to get stuck into recording part 1, finally.
Luckily us, but you'll still see this is part 2, and been a good show, Mark.
All right. Thanks, Glenn.
Bye.